Breaking games is a lot of fun. It's hard to argue against that, but so is actually making them. In fact, before having my free time gobbled up by Silksong, I had been spending the better part of it on game development for a while. Today, we are taking a break from glitch hunting. Don't worry, we'll be back soon enough, because I feel like sharing my personal Metroidvania development journey I started all the way back in 2024, a year before Silksong was released. Now, back then I knew very little about game dev in general, other than it was very hard to get into and even more to get a sizable project going, but undeterred by this bleak prospect, I decided to get into it. I chose Godot as my engine, very popular among beginners and open source, and Metroidvania as the genre for my first project. I figured the programming wouldn't be too hard and I would get the chance to at least learn a bit about most things I cared about learning. Pixel art, coding, music, level design, enemies and bosses, sound design, lighting, save file management, and even a little bit about UIs and menus. I decided to try to make every single asset by myself too, just because I really had no idea how to go about it, and honestly it just sounded like a fun challenge. The game you've been seeing for a while now is Save Your Human, the currently available demo at least. You can go and play it right now if you want. The project is and will always be completely free. The demo is intended to take you around 20 to 30 minutes to beat, so it's not very long, depending on whether or not you get stuck fighting the final boss. The thing is though, and this is something I've learned the hard way, Metroidvanias are asset heavy, like really asset heavy. Consider a typical Metroidvania room, the layered parallaxing background, the foreground tilesets and decorations, the character sprites and animations, the enemy sprites and animations, the music, sound effects, and that's to say nothing about lighting, modulations, shaders, particles, camera tricks, and other effects. I really wanted to make everything fully original, so I had to get learning. That's the story I would like to share with you today. And so I began. Godot was my engine, Sprite for everything pixel art, LMMS for music, although I did eventually upgrade to FL Studio, and Audacity for sound effects. Now, because I was learning everything from scratch, it's fair to say it took a great deal of willpower and countless YouTube tutorials, guides, and other resources. But fortunately, Save Your Human does not exist in a vacuum, and I'm able to draw inspiration and learn from other games. Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission are a masterclass on pixel art, for example. Environmental Station Alpha is another favorite of mine for its brilliant boss design and general mechanics. Axiom Verge really hits the nail with the atmosphere, story and music. AM2R also has fantastic music. Super Metroid is amazing for its admittedly unintended sequence breaks and creative use of mechanics, and more or less the same can be said about Animal Well. Ironically, given my other videos on this channel, Save Your Human does not draw that much inspiration from Hollow Knight, neither will I change too much about it after Silksong. The games by Team Cherry are phenomenal experiences, but they strongly focus on combat and platforming. With Save Your Human, I want the spotlight to be more on navigation and exploration as the main driving force behind the gameplay loop. There will be combat and platforming, and in fact there is already a lot of that in the demo, but I want them to be the means rather than the goal, if that makes sense. You see, I like to imagine Metroidvanias living in a kind of 2D space, where the horizontal position relates to how much the game relies on combat for the moment-to-moment gameplay. Castlevania games and Hollow Knight are towards the right, while things like Animal Well strongly live on the left side, providing gameplay experiences much closer to actual puzzle games. Then the vertical axis relates to the overall feeling of the progression. Games toward the bottom are made to feel epic, heroic, and evoke a grand feeling of adventure. These are games to be beaten, while the upper side houses more hostile backtracking filled maze-like worlds which exist regardless of the player and their success. These embody more exploration, self-reflection, and sometimes even a bit of terror. But not the cheap jumpscare terror, more like a you've dove too deep kind of feeling. These games are to be survived. Get in, finish your quests, and get out of there before things get bad. Hopefully you can agree with me that games in the lower right corner are mostly Castlevanias, but here we would have things like the Dark Souls saga as well, while Metroid and Metroid-likes fit more in the top left quadrant. Then I think it's fair to conclude that true Metroidvanias tend to stay close towards the center, as the genre is defined by the combination of all of these elements, while games further apart are usually better described by other genres. Now, Save Your Human is much limited in scope than anything on this chart, but I would like to at least try to aim towards this area. Unsurprisingly, this is where all my inspirations lie as well, and that is why Hollow Knight and Silksong feel like a different game than what I'm trying to achieve. As to how the game is coming together, well, I would say that since Save Your Human has been my primary means of learning game dev, the project has been growing in complexity as my range of capabilities expands. I really don't have much footage from the beginning, but from what I can remember, I started with the coding, for if there's no code, then there's really no game to talk about, with few exceptions. I did experiment a little bit with C++ because it was the language I was more familiar with among those that can actually be used with Godot. Especially for a beginner, language choice is just a matter of preference, but my reasoning was that since I was learning from scratch, I'd rather learn the more widespread language anyway. But pretty early I realized that the amount of resources on Godot C++ is, well, not that many, let alone tutorials and such on how to actually start. So I compromised and chose to use C# rather than Godot's own language, GDScript. My main reason to do so was that at this point I still wasn't completely sold out on Godot, and I thought that any experience on C# would transfer much more seamlessly to Unity. Which is true, by the way. Actually, Godot and Unity share a lot of DNA. With the benefit of hindsight though, I can tell you that game dev coding is not really about language choice, but rather about patterns, specific ways of conveniently and efficiently getting specific things done. That's what you want to learn. Let me show you a couple of examples. One of the most common is the observer pattern, also known in Godot as signals. Signals make it possible to connect functionality to events in the game. For example, once an enemy's hitbox enters the player's hardbox, a signal is emitted and all the methods subscribed to that event get triggered automatically. You can also connect and disconnect these methods dynamically at runtime. Not only that, but also signals synergize very well with asynchronous methods via the await keyword, providing what's probably the single most useful one-liner of all time. In this particular case, we pause the execution of this method for some arbitrary length of time. Fortunately, all of that can be done automatically with this single line. Another big eye-opener for me were twins. Twins are interpolators that allow you to animate the properties of objects like the position, size, color, and so on. Trust me, you do not want to set up an animation player node for every single thing you want to animate. It's much easier to use twins and animate things via code, particularly if you're like me and you feel more comfortable writing code than fumbling through the menus in the editor. You might view these patterns as simple nice-to-haves, and you would have a point, but I assure you that they are the name of the game when it comes to game programming. You see, in general it's not so much about whether or not something can be done, because almost any system you can imagine can be implemented. It's rather about whether you can make it happen in a way that's lean, manageable, and self-contained. That is why refactoring is so common. You are naturally and constantly coming up with better and more streamlined ways of writing the systems currently in place, and that in turn is what gets the project to grow. So do not sleep on patterns. Anyway, that's the coding rant over. Let's now continue with the video. Even though I mentioned before that I began by writing code, it quickly became apparent that I was going to need assets of a wide variety. Being able to confidently produce each asset type required me to go on a few training arcs, or side quests if you want to call them like that, most of which are still ongoing. But even if there's still way to go, I feel I've definitely improved and steadily made progress in all of these art-related areas. When it comes to the sprites, I had some very limited experience from an unrelated project I did long ago, so I decided to go with that for the animated objects and characters. I have to say though, in the beginning I was not super great at it. Look at the earliest version of the main character. I mean, not to say that the current one is perfect, but obviously there has been some improvement. I am definitely no expert, so I recommend that you use references and watch videos on how to animate, but in general I think it's better to exaggerate the movement and also make it non-linear. Just like when editing video, you really want easing into and out of your keyframes. As for light developments, I recently started learning to make smeared animations, where one or more blurry transition frames are added between keyframes. In general, I'm finding my groove with robotic enemies and elements, while I still have a lot to learn with respect to making biological creatures and more complex designs. But it's coming together, I think. The tilesets and all static props in general are comparatively easier to make for me. You can really see the improvement over time too. If I'm stuck, I sometimes go looking for ideas and references on the internet, but once I have a general idea of what a single floor tile might look like, then it's just a matter of creating variations for walls, ceiling, ramps, platforms, and so on. When it comes to the actual demo of Save Your Human, this is also an area that has been receiving a lot of feedback from alpha testers and thus has been steadily improving over time. The goal is to make every level's play area instantly readable and delimited. For the background side quest, I have to work on large-scale pixel art drawings. I find the sprite to be a very easy to work with tool to make this too. If the idea is clear enough in my head, I start drawing right away, but otherwise I like to search the internet for screenshots of my main reference games. I can't really show you the evolution of this because even the first few backgrounds I made are still in the game. I have gone in several times and retouched the colors a bit according to feedback from testers, but not really much more. It's a demanding but very rewarding area to work on, because you can get a lot of use out of mixing and matching layers to create new combined backgrounds. Come to think of it, it's probably among the more successful side quests of this project so far. For all of these pixel art related tasks, I cannot understate how useful it is having a strict color palette and grid size limitations. It allows you to reduce the number of possibilities from literally infinite to something manageable by trial and error. If you want some admittedly cliché but important techniques, here you have a few. As for the music, if you are like me and know literally nothing about it, neither you play an instrument, well, it was expectedly quite hard to get going. I started by learning the basics of music theory. You really do not need that much. Scales, chords, chord progressions, and a bit of layering and harmony. Effects and mastering are the next step, which I still have not tackled. But that's almost all you need. Then I started making themes. It is really hard, but I only needed a couple for the alpha version of the game, and I was able to get something that at least testers didn't complain too much about. But I feel that this is the weakest part of the project right now. Music choice is extremely consequential for Metroidvanias, in my opinion, and it's something that I want to get 100% right, so there's a lot to improve. If you feel like helping me out by giving me some feedback, I'll leave a card to my other channel where I have uploaded the first few themes of the game, so you can go now and have a quick listen if it piques your curiosity. Any feedback you have will be extremely valuable for me and very much appreciated, so consider leaving a comment if you end up checking it out. And last but not least is the side quest for the sound effects. I use Audacity for this. I usually record something myself or make noise with whatever I have lying around that day, and then I start adding effects, modifying the speed and tempo, using vocoders, phasers, distortion. It's basically trial and error. Honestly, making the sound effects is a lot of fun. I wouldn't say that what is in the game right now is necessarily great, but I do find I'm steadily improving, which at the end of the day is really what I care the most about. Everything that has been mentioned so far is available in the latest build of the game, up on itch.io, so if you're interested in what you see, just know that you can head there right now and play the game for yourself. Obviously the project is and will always be completely free. Just do not expect a super fleshed out experience yet. Right now the game map contains around 35 screens, arranged in 15 or so rooms. There are also a couple of grades for you to find, a few enemies to fight, and a final boss to defeat. Expect around 20 to 30 minutes of real gameplay. As for the current goals, I never planned Savior Human to be a really big game. In fact, that's probably not really a good idea when you're starting out, but considering the systems that I currently have made, I'm quite confident in my ability to expand the alpha version significantly, up to around triple the current size or 1 to 2 hours of real gameplay. Apart from the currently available caves, I have plans for 3 more environments, another couple of bosses, and a final more climactic confrontation, along with a very limited in-game cutscene based story. When will that happen? Well, I don't really know. I do work on the game almost every day for a few hours, but as every game developer knows or eventually realizes, making predictions about when a certain feature will be done is bound to be an exercise in frustration in 99% of cases. With that said though, I would like to have the game done in a few months, but like I said, things might very well end up taking much longer than that, and I'm really in no rush. Making YouTube videos or posts about the game is great because it gives me a short-time goal, makes me focus on a specific aspect that needs to get done and might otherwise be procrastinated away forever. And also it provides a sensible milestone to look back upon, kind of like a snapshot of the project when the video is published. You see, there's no single part in game design that is crushingly hard, or at least not enough to grind things to a halt and derail the project entirely. It's rather the sheer volume and amount of tasks to be done which really can get demotivating at times. But YouTube is not like that. A normal video will be ready in a few weeks of work at most, not only suddenly making you aware of the results of your effort, but also providing a means to get feedback from viewers. Seriously, I cannot understate how valuable that is, which is why, if you have stuck with me this far, I really want to thank you for watching. Anyway, I guess that's all for me today. I'm planning to mostly dedicate this channel to gaming adventures, but I might throw in more game dev videos in the future if you like this one. In the meantime, here is my other channel, Ibsen's Castle, where I was in the process of uploading devlogs before the Silksong mania broke out. Right now they are in Spanish, but I'm actually considering switching to English in the future.